Hello, welcome to Unlocking Buddhism. Have you ever stopped to wonder what true freedom would feel like? Not the freedom of having more money, more comfort, or more control over life, but a deeper kind of freedom, a peace that cannot be shaken by loss, by fear, or even by death. For thousands of years, seekers across cultures have searched for this state. Some called it salvation, others called it awakening. In the teachings of the Buddha, it received a quiet and powerful name, Nirvana. But what is Nirvana really? Many people imagine it as a distant paradise, a mystical place somewhere beyond the world. Others think it means disappearing or escaping life altogether. Yet the Buddha described something far more subtle and far more profound. Nirvana is not a place you travel to. It is a fire that goes out. Imagine a flame burning in the darkness. The flame survives only because something keeps feeding it. Wood, oil, fuel. Without that fuel, the flame simply fades. The Buddha said, the same is true for human suffering. Inside the mind burn three invisible fires: craving, hatred, and ignorance. These are the forces that keep the wheel of suffering turning. They push us to chase what cannot satisfy us and to resist what cannot be avoided. Nirvana is what happens when those fires finally lose their fuel. Not through force, not through escape, but through deep understanding. In this video, we will gently explore what Nirvana truly means according to the Buddha's teachings. We will see why it is not reserved for monks or saints, but is a possibility hidden within every human life. And as you listen, I invite you to reflect on one quiet question. If the fires of desire and confusion suddenly stopped burning in your mind, what kind of peace would remain? Before we continue, leave a short comment below with just one word: peace. Let that word be the beginning of our journey. Long before cities rose and fell, before the noise of modern life filled the human mind with endless distractions, there was a man who asked a simple but unsettling question. Why do human beings suffer? Prince Siddhartha Gautama had grown up surrounded by comfort. His father, the king, had tried to protect him from every unpleasant aspect of life. The palace gardens were always beautiful. Music filled the halls. Servants ensured that nothing disturbing ever reached the young prince. But reality has a way of finding us. One day, Siddhartha left the palace and encountered something he had never seen before. An old man, bent and fragile. The prince asked his companion what had happened to him. "This is aging," the companion explained. The words stayed in his mind. Soon after, he saw another sight, a man sick with disease, weak and trembling. Then he saw a funeral procession, carrying a lifeless body. Aging, illness, death. For the first time, Siddhartha realized that no palace walls could protect anyone from the truth of existence. Every human life, no matter how privileged, was moving toward loss. Yet something even deeper disturbed him. People knew this reality. They had seen aging, sickness, and death many times, and still they lived as if these truths did not exist. They chased pleasure, fought for power, accumulated wealth, and clung desperately to things that could never last. It was as if the entire world was caught in a dream. One evening, Siddhartha encountered a wandering monk. Unlike the others he had seen, this man carried a quiet calm within him. His face was peaceful, his eyes clear. Siddhartha asked. The answer was simple. This man was seeking freedom from suffering. That night, the prince made a decision that would change the course of history. He left the palace, his royal life, and everything familiar behind. Not because he rejected the world, but because he wanted to understand it fully. For years, he practiced extreme asceticism. He fasted until his body became weak. He pushed his limits, believing that perhaps suffering itself was the path to liberation. But eventually, he realized something important. Extreme pleasure traps the mind, but extreme deprivation traps it as well. Neither leads to freedom. So Siddhartha chose a different way, what he later called the middle way, a path of clarity rather than extremes. One night, seated beneath a tree that would later be known as the Bodhi tree, he made a quiet vow. He would not rise until he understood the nature of suffering and the path beyond it. As the night deepened, his mind turned inward with unwavering attention. He saw how every human experience arises from causes and conditions. He saw how craving fuels attachment, and attachment fuels suffering. He saw the endless cycle of grasping and becoming that binds beings to dissatisfaction. And then something extraordinary happened. The chain broke. When craving ceased, the fire that sustained suffering had nothing left to burn. The mind became completely free from greed, hatred, and delusion. In that moment, Siddhartha became the Buddha, the awakened one. But the freedom he discovered was not a magical reward or a heavenly realm. It was something far more subtle. It was the extinguishing of the fires that had been burning in the human mind all along. This is what the Buddha called Nirvana, not the destruction of life, not an escape from the world, but the complete cooling of the mind when it no longer clings to what cannot last. And from that moment onward, the Buddha spent 45 years walking from village to village, teaching one simple truth. Freedom is possible, but it begins with understanding the fires within our own mind. To understand Nirvana, we first need to understand the nature of the problem the Buddha discovered. The Buddha did not begin his teaching by speaking about enlightenment. He began by speaking about suffering, not in a pessimistic way, but in an honest way. He observed something very simple about human life. Even in moments of joy, there is an undercurrent of instability. Everything we love changes. Everything we build eventually dissolves. This insight became what the Buddha called the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha. Dukkha is often translated as suffering, but its meaning is broader. It includes dissatisfaction, restlessness, the subtle feeling that something in life is never completely secure. Even when things go well, the mind quietly worries about losing them. The Buddha asked a deeper question: why does this happen? His answer formed the second noble truth. The root of suffering is craving. Craving is not simply desire. It is the mental movement that insists that reality must be different from what it is. We crave pleasant experiences. We crave identity, recognition, permanence. And at the same time, we resist pain, uncertainty, and change. This constant pushing and pulling creates tension in the mind. Imagine holding a rope that is constantly being pulled in two directions. Eventually, the hands begin to ache. In the same way, the mind becomes exhausted by the endless effort to control life. But the Buddha did not stop at diagnosing the problem. His teaching carries a profound optimism. The third noble truth states that suffering can cease. When craving ends, the cycle that produces suffering also ends. This cessation is what the Buddha called nirvana. Nirvana is not something that is created. It is not a reward given by an external power. It is what remains when the causes of suffering are no longer present. The Buddha described it as the extinguishing of a flame. A flame burns only as long as it has fuel. When the fuel is removed, the flame naturally goes out. In the same way, when greed, hatred, and ignorance lose their support in the mind, the fires of suffering fade. What remains is a state of profound peace and freedom. However, this freedom does not appear by accident. It requires a path of cultivation. This path is known as the Noble Eightfold Path. It is not a sequence of steps to complete one after another, but a way of living that gradually transforms the mind. It begins with right view, seeing reality clearly, especially the truth of impermanence. Everything that arises eventually passes away. When we deeply understand this, attachment begins to loosen. Right intention follows naturally. Instead of acting from selfish craving or hostility, the mind begins to move toward renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. From there, the path continues through ethical living, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. These aspects purify the way we interact with the world. When our actions are guided by integrity, the mind becomes lighter and less conflicted. Then comes the training of the mind itself. Right effort encourages us to cultivate wholesome mental states and gently abandon harmful ones. Right mindfulness teaches us to observe our experience with clarity and presence, seeing thoughts and emotions arise without immediately becoming entangled in them. Finally, right concentration stabilizes the mind through meditation. A concentrated mind becomes calm and clear, like a still lake reflecting the moon. When wisdom deepens through this practice, the illusion that we must cling to things begins to dissolve. And when that clinging completely ends, the fires of suffering finally lose their fuel. That moment of complete release is what the Buddha called nirvana. It is not something distant from ordinary life. It begins quietly, each time the mind releases its grip on what it cannot control. Little by little, the mind cools. And in that cooling, true freedom appears. At this point, Nirvana might still feel distant, like a profound philosophical idea that belongs only to ancient monks or dedicated meditators. But the Buddha never intended his teaching to remain abstract. His insight into suffering and liberation was meant to illuminate ordinary life, because the fires that lead to suffering do not live in some distant realm. They live in very familiar places. They appear in the quiet impatience we feel when things do not go our way. They appear in the subtle jealousy that arises when someone else succeeds. They appear in the anxiety that grows when we try to control what cannot truly be controlled. Every day the mind reaches outward, grasping for something it believes will finally complete it. A promotion at work, recognition from others, a relationship that will make everything feel secure. There is nothing inherently wrong with these things. The Buddha never taught that life must be rejected. And so the chasing begins. When the goal is achieved, the relief is temporary. Soon the mind looks for something else, another achievement, another possession, another reassurance. This cycle continues so naturally that most people never question it, but the Buddha invites us to pause and observe. Imagine a moment when something frustrating happens. Perhaps someone speaks harshly to you, or a plan you carefully prepared suddenly collapses. The usual reaction is immediate. Anger arises. Defensiveness follows. The mind begins building stories about what should have happened instead. But mindfulness introduces a small space. Instead of reacting automatically, the mind simply observes. Anger is present. This simple observation begins to weaken the fire. Not because anger is suppressed, but because it is understood. When we see a mental state clearly, we stop feeding it blindly. The same is true for craving. When a strong desire appears, perhaps the urge to prove ourselves, to win an argument, or to hold on to an image of who we believe we must be, mindfulness allows us to notice the movement of grasping. We see the mind reaching, and in that moment of seeing, something subtle changes. The grip softens. This is how the path toward nirvana unfolds in everyday life, not through dramatic events, but through small moments of understanding repeated many times. Each moment of awareness weakens the habit of automatic craving. Each moment of patience cools the fire of anger. Each moment of clarity dissolves a little more ignorance. Gradually, the mind becomes lighter. We begin to discover a quiet truth. Peace does not come from controlling the world, but from understanding the mind that reacts to the world. This does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. On the contrary, when the mind is not driven by craving or fear, actions become wiser and more compassionate. We speak more carefully, we listen more deeply, we respond rather than react. In this way, the teachings of Nirvana begin to shape how we live, how we work, and how we relate to others. The path is not about escaping life. It is about learning to live in the world without being consumed by the fires within the mind. And when people first hear about Nirvana, they often imagine it as something distant, almost unreachable. A state reserved for great sages who abandon ordinary life and spend decades in deep meditation. But the Buddha's teaching points to something more intimate. The path to nirvana does not begin somewhere far away. It begins exactly where we are, within the movements of our own mind. Every moment of life presents the same quiet choice. We can react from habit, feeding the fires of craving, anger, and confusion. Or we can pause, observe, and understand what is happening inside us. This pause may seem small, but it changes everything. When the mind begins to observe itself honestly, it starts to see patterns that were once invisible. We notice how quickly we cling to pleasant experiences, fearing the moment they might disappear. We notice how strongly we resist discomfort, as if life should unfold exactly according to our preferences. Gradually, we begin to understand something the Buddha emphasized again and again: impermanence. Everything changes. Pleasure changes. Pain changes. Relationships change. Even the sense of who we think we are continues to evolve over time. At first, this truth can feel unsettling. The mind wants stability, certainty, something solid to hold on to. But when impermanence is seen clearly, it begins to bring a surprising kind of freedom. If everything changes, then no emotional storm can last forever. Anger fades, fear fades, grief slowly softens, and even the restless desire that pushes the mind from one pursuit to another eventually loses its force when it is no longer believed blindly. Understanding impermanence loosens the grip of attachment. But the Buddha also pointed to another insight that deepens this freedom: the absence of a fixed, permanent self. We spend much of our lives protecting an idea of who we think we are. We defend our opinions, our identity, our image in the eyes of others. Yet when we look closely, this self is not a solid entity. It is a changing collection of memories, sensations, thoughts, and roles. Seeing this clearly dissolves much of the tension that fills the mind. Without the need to constantly defend a rigid identity, life becomes more fluid. Compassion grows naturally because we recognize that others are also moving through the same fragile and changing experience of being human. In this way, wisdom and compassion mature together. The mind becomes less interested in winning arguments or proving itself superior. Instead, it becomes interested in understanding, in reducing harm, and in living with greater clarity. And slowly, almost quietly, the fires begin to cool. Craving loses its urgency. Anger loses its heat. Ignorance begins to dissolve in the light of direct understanding. Nirvana is not something dramatic that suddenly appears from outside. It is the natural peace that emerges when the causes of suffering are no longer sustained. Like a fire that gently fades when the fuel is gone, the mind settles into a state of profound calm. This calm is not indifference. It is not emotional emptiness. It is a clear, stable freedom that allows a person to live in the world with wisdom, kindness, and deep inner peace. And the path toward that peace begins with something very simple: seeing clearly. Every moment of genuine awareness brings us one step closer to that cooling. As we reach the end of this reflection, it is worth remembering something simple but profound about the Buddha's discovery. He did not claim to create nirvana. He did not claim to grant liberation to others. He simply pointed to a reality that had always been present, waiting to be understood. The fires of greed, hatred, and ignorance burn within the human mind, shaping the way we experience the world. They push us to grasp at what cannot last, to resist what cannot be avoided, and to misunderstand the nature of our own existence. But the Buddha also showed that these fires are not permanent. They continue burning only because they are fed by unconscious habits, fed by clinging, fed by the illusion that lasting happiness can be found in what is constantly changing. When this is seen clearly, something remarkable begins to happen. The mind slowly stops adding fuel to the fire. Moments of craving are recognized and allowed to pass. Moments of anger are understood instead of blindly acted upon. Moments of confusion become opportunities for deeper awareness. Little by little, the heat of suffering cools. And within that cooling, a different kind of peace begins to emerge. A peace that does not depend on perfect circumstances, success, or control over the world. This is the direction of the path the Buddha offered. Not a promise of escaping life, but a way of living with greater clarity, freedom, and compassion. Nirvana may seem like a distant horizon, but its seeds are present in every moment we choose awareness over habit, understanding over reaction, and wisdom over confusion. Each small moment of clarity matters. Each moment of letting go weakens the fires that once seemed unstoppable. And step by step, the mind discovers that true peace has never been something to chase. It has always been something to uncover. Before you leave, take a quiet moment and reflect on this question. If the fires of craving, anger, and confusion were no longer guiding your mind, how would your life feel? If this reflection resonated with you, share one word in the comments that describes what nirvana means to you. Peace, freedom, clarity, stillness. Your word might inspire someone else who is walking the same path. And if you wish to continue exploring the wisdom of the Buddha, consider subscribing and joining us in future reflections. Until the next video, take a moment today to simply observe the mind. Sometimes, the path to freedom begins with a single breath of awareness.